Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I'm Dallas, 23 years old, and I've dreamed of becoming a published author since I was a kid in Portland. My parents never saw writing as a real career path. That became painfully clear last Christmas. While my younger brother Jason received the latest iPhone with proud congratulations, I opened a dollar store notebook and a pen that didn't even work. That moment of quiet humiliation revealed the truth about my family. Ironically, that worthless notebook would change my life forever, just not in the way anyone expected. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and if you've dealt with family favoritism, hit that like and subscribe button. Growing up in our spacious colonial home in the West Hills of Portland, the contrast between how my brother and I were treated was as obvious as the rain in Oregon winters. My father, Richard, built his reputation as one of the city's most successful corporate lawyers, while my mother, Margaret, worked as a respected pediatrician at Oregon Health and Science University Hospital. They created a comfortable upper-middle-class life with all the trimmings. Summer vacations to Europe, country club memberships, and private school educations for both their sons. From the moment Jason was born, 3 years after me, the family dynamic shifted. He was the spitting image of our father, athletic, outgoing, and naturally gifted at anything involving competition. By elementary school, he was already collecting trophies in baseball, basketball, and eventually football. My parents never missed a single game, rearranging their busy schedules to cheer from the sidelines, my father often serving as an assistant coach despite his 70-hour work weeks. I was different. While Jason dominated the playing fields, I haunted the school library. Words fascinated me, how they could transport you to different worlds or make you feel emotions you hadn't experienced. My fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, was the first to notice my writing talent. She entered my short story in a regional competition without telling me. When I won first place, my parents couldn't attend the award ceremony because it coincided with Jason's baseball tournament. My grandmother took me instead. "Your parents are proud of you," she assured me, though her tight smile suggested otherwise. "They're just busy." That pattern continued throughout our childhood. Jason's achievements were celebrated with elaborate dinners and expensive gifts. My academic successes and writing awards received brief acknowledgments, often as afterthoughts. "That's nice, Dallas," my father would say, barely looking up from his legal briefs. "But make sure you're focusing on subjects that will lead to a stable career." When Jason turned 16, my parents surprised him with a brand new Audi, claiming he needed it to drive to football practice. 3 years earlier, on my 16th birthday, I received a monthly bus pass and a lecture about responsibility. The message was clear. Jason was the investment worth making. Despite this, I pursued my passion through high school and into college, majoring in English literature at Portland State while working part-time jobs to cover expenses my parents deemed unnecessary. My scholarship covered tuition but little else. Meanwhile, Jason attended the University of Oregon's business school on our parents' full financial support, complete with a luxury apartment and spending allowance. Now, a year after graduation, I was living with 2 roommates in a cramped apartment in southeast Portland. 5 mornings a week, I worked as a barista at an independent coffee shop, using every spare moment to write. Nights and weekends belonged to my novel, a coming-of-age story I'd been crafting for months. Rejection letters from literary agents were piling up, but I refused to quit. My girlfriend Rachel believed in me when few others did. We'd met at a creative writing workshop 2 years ago, and she'd become my greatest supporter. "Your writing has something special," she insisted one evening as we shared cheap takeout in my apartment. "It's authentic. Right. Publishers will recognize that eventually." I wanted to believe her, but doubt crept in during weak moments. My bank account perpetually hovered near zero, and my parents' dismissive comments during our increasingly rare phone calls didn't help. "When are you going to get a real job?" my father would ask. "You can't make cappuccinos forever." "Writing is a hobby, not a career," my mother would chime in. Look at your brother, he's already got an internship lined up at a financial firm after graduation. The unspoken comparison hung in the air during every conversation. Jason was succeeding. Dallas was failing. Still, I persisted. Each morning, I'd wake before dawn to write for 2 hours before my shift. Each rejection letter hurt, but I revised and submitted again. Something inside wouldn't let me quit, even as my parents' skepticism deepened into disapproval. "You're just being stubborn," my mother said during our last call before Christmas. "There's nothing wrong with admitting your limitations and pursuing something more practical." Despite everything, part of me still craved their approval. That's why, against my better judgment, I agreed to spend Christmas at the family home, a decision I would soon regret more than I could have imagined. The familiar knot in my stomach tightened as I stepped off the bus 3 blocks from my parents' house. Snow dusted the manicured lawns of the West Hills neighborhood where I'd grown up, Christmas lights twinkling from every eave and tree. Our house, a 4,000-square-foot colonial my father had purchased when his law practice took off, was always the most elaborately decorated on the block. This year was no exception. Animatronic reindeer dotted the front yard. Professionally hung garlands framed every window. A massive noble fir, visible through the bay window, sparkled with what had to be thousands of tiny white lights. My mother spared no expense for the holidays, especially now that both her sons were adults and these gatherings were more precious. At least that's what she claimed in the guilt-laden voice message she'd left when I initially declined the invitation. "Your brother is coming home with wonderful news," she'd said. "Don't you want to be part of this family celebration?" So here I was, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, trudging up the heated driveway that never showed a hint of ice. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal my mother, perfect in her red cashmere sweater and designer jeans. "Dallas, you made it," she pulled me into a quick hug that smelled of expensive perfume. "You're just in time, dinner's almost ready." The house looked like a Christmas catalog photo shoot. Every surface gleamed. Garlands adorned the staircase. The formal living room hosted a 12-foot tree surrounded by wrapped presents in coordinating paper. Even the air smelled perfect, cinnamon and pine and roasting meat. In the kitchen, my father stood talking with Jason, both holding crystal tumblers of scotch. My brother had grown broader since I'd last seen him at Easter. His business school lifestyle, daily gym sessions and protein shakes, had sculpted him into an even more impressive version of himself. "The prodigal returns," my father raised his glass with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Want a drink, son?" "Sure," I said, dropping my bag by the staircase. Jason clapped me on the shoulder, nearly causing me to stumble. "The coffee shop giving you Christmas break? Or did you finally get a real job?" "I'm still at groundwork," I said, accepting the much weaker drink my father handed me. "But I'm also writing. A lot." "Still with the novels," my father chuckled, exchanging a look with Jason. "Well, everyone needs a hobby." My mother swooped in before I could respond. "Let's eat. I've made all your favorites, Jason. Prime rib, twice-baked potatoes, that truffle mac and cheese you love." Dinner was an exercise in silent endurance. My father and Jason dominated the conversation with business talk, market trends, investment opportunities, and Jason's upcoming internship at a prestigious financial firm in Chicago. "They only take 3 interns from the whole country," my mother gushed, refilling Jason's wine glass for the 3rd time while mine remained empty. "And they're already hinting they'll offer him a permanent position." "Nothing certain yet," Jason said with false modesty. "But my advisor says I'm their top pick." "Of course you are," my father beamed. "The Williams men always rise to the top." I pushed my food around, appetite fading. No one asked about my writing. No one asked about my life at all. After dinner, my mother insisted we all watch Jason's business school presentation that had apparently impressed his professors so much. 45 excruciating minutes of PowerPoint slides about market penetration strategies for some tech company I'd never heard of. My parents watched with rapt attention, interjecting with proud comments about their son's brilliance. "Dallas, isn't your brother impressive?" my mother prompted when the presentation ended. Very thorough, I managed. That night I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, unchanged since high school. Debate trophies I'd won gathered dust on shelves. Literary awards stood in a forgotten corner. The contrast with Jason's room, regularly updated and now converted to a stylish guest suite, wasn't subtle. Morning arrived with forced cheer and my mother's special Christmas breakfast: Belgian waffles, bacon, fresh fruit, and mimosas. After eating, we gathered around the tree for the gift exchange. My father received a custom-fitted set of golf clubs from my mother. She opened a jewelry box containing a diamond bracelet that made her squeal with delight. They exchanged knowing smiles. Clearly these surprises had been coordinated in advance. Jason went next, tearing through package after package. Designer clothes, a high-end laptop bag, wireless headphones, and finally, the latest iPhone in its sleek box. "You've earned it," my mother said proudly as she hugged him. "Your hard work deserves rewards." Then it was my turn. A single small package wrapped in leftover paper from last year. Inside, a flimsy notebook from the dollar store and a cheap ballpoint pen. The price sticker was still attached to the back. $150.9. My father snickered. Jason laughed openly. "For your stories," my mother explained, as if I might not understand the purpose of a notebook. I tried to speak but couldn't find words. This wasn't thoughtlessness, this was intentional. The pen didn't even work. When I tried to scribble on the first page, it left only indentations. "Thanks," I managed, forcing a smile while something cracked inside me. "Well, what did you expect?" Jason smirked. "It's not like you need anything fancy to write stories no one will publish." My mother didn't correct him. My father chuckled. "I got you something practical," my mother added. "Something you'll actually use." I sat silently as they moved on, watching Jason unwrap more gifts. At some point, I excused myself to use the bathroom, locking the door and sitting on the edge of the tub, breathing deeply to control the burning behind my eyes. Through the vent, I could hear them in the living room. "Do you think he liked it?" my mother's voice. "Who cares?" Jason replied. "Maybe he'll take the hint and give up that useless hobby." "I just worry about him," she said. "He's wasting his potential on these stories. He could do something real if he tried." "He's always been stubborn," my father added, refusing to see reality. I splashed cold water on my face and returned to the living room with a manufactured smile. The rest of the day passed in a blur of Christmas movies, more food, and increasingly tense small talk. By evening, I'd made my decision. While everyone slept that night, I quietly packed my bag. The bus schedule showed a 2 a.m. departure that would get me back to Portland by morning. I took the notebook and pen not because I wanted them, but because leaving them behind would make a statement I wasn't brave enough to verbalize. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Had to get back to the city. We're called. Thanks for Christmas. Dallas." It wasn't true, but it was easier than the truth. The Christmas lights lining our street flickered in the darkness as I shouldered my duffel bag and quietly pulled the front door closed. The soft click of the latch felt oddly final. 3 inches of fresh snow muffled my footsteps as I made my way down the driveway and onto the sidewalk. The world was silent, peaceful, in stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I tucked the dollar store notebook into my jacket pocket, feeling its flimsy cover bend. The pen, still non-functional, I kept in my hand, turning it over and over as I walked. Such a small thing to trigger such a profound realization. 23 years of hoping for approval, acceptance, even just acknowledgement from my family, all crystallized in this cheap piece of plastic that couldn't even perform its one simple function. The bus stop was deserted at 1:45 in the morning on Christmas. I stamped my feet against the cold, watching my breath cloud in the frigid air. The holiday decorations throughout the neighborhood seemed to mock the occasion with their cheerful lights and messages of family togetherness. When the bus finally arrived, I was the only passenger. The driver, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, gave me a sympathetic nod. "Rough Christmas?" he asked as I paid my fare. "You could say that," I replied, choosing a seat in the middle where I could spread out. "Family can be complicated," he offered, pulling away from the curb. "Especially this time of year." I didn't respond, but his words echoed as we drove through the empty streets. Complicated. That was one way to put it. As Portland's suburbs gave way to the city proper, I rested my forehead against the cool window, watching snowflakes dance in the headlights. By the time we reached my stop in southeast Portland, the first hint of dawn was breaking over Mount Hood in the distance. My apartment building looked abandoned, most residents away visiting family for the holidays. The key stuck in the lock it always did when the weather turned cold, but finally gave way with a familiar scrape. Inside, the silence was oppressive. My roommates Kevin and Marcus were both gone until after New Year's. I dropped my bag in the entryway and stood in the dark living room. The small artificial tree we'd set up in the corner seemed pathetic now, its dollar store ornaments and single strand of lights reflecting my new reality. This was my real home, not the pristine showcase where I'd grown up, but this slightly shabby apartment with mismatched furniture and questionable plumbing. My phone chimed with a text from Rachel. Hope Christmas with the family is going okay. Miss you. Call me tomorrow. Red. I didn't have the energy to explain what had happened. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the notebook and pen on my nightstand like artifacts from another life. Around 4 in the morning, I gave up, switched on my lamp, and reached for the notebook. Its thin pages and flimsy cover represented everything my parents thought of my ambitions: cheap, disposable, not worth investing in. I found a working pen in my desk drawer and opened to the first blank page. For several minutes, I just stared at the lined paper. Then, almost without conscious thought, I began to write. Not my novel. Not a short story. Just the raw truth of what I was feeling, the years of comparison, of never measuring up, of being the family afterthought. Words flowed in a way they never had before, uncensored and unfiltered. By the time sunlight streamed through my window, I'd filled 12 pages with tiny, cramped handwriting. My phone rang at 9:30, my mother. I silenced it. Another call at 10, my father. Ignored. A text from Jason at 11. Where the hell did you go? Mom's freaking out. I turned my phone off completely. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange, isolated bubble. I left the apartment only to buy groceries and coffee. The rest of the time I wrote. The notebook filled quickly, so I switched to my laptop, transcribing the handwritten pages and continuing where I'd left off. What had started as an emotional purge was evolving into something more structured, a narrative about family dynamics, expectations, and the quiet violence of favoritism. Rachel came over on December 28th, concerned after not hearing from me for days. You just disappeared, she said, sitting cross-legged on my bed while I paced the small room. What happened? I told her everything, the gifts, the overheard conversation, my midnight departure. I'm so sorry, Dallas, she said when I finished. Her eyes reflected genuine pain on my behalf, something I'd never seen in my families. What they did was cruel. The thing is, I said, picking up the notebook, this might be the best thing they could have given me. I've written more in the past 3 days than in the previous 3 months. Because you're writing from a place of truth now, she observed, reaching for my hand. Not trying to prove something to them anymore. My best friend Trevor visited on New Year's Eve, bringing cheap champagne and takeout Chinese food. Like Rachel, he listened without judgment as I recounted the Christmas disaster. Dude, I've been telling you for years they don't deserve you, he said, refilling our paper cups with bubbly. What are you going to do now? Right, I answered simply. Just right. And your family? I shrugged. I'm not ready to talk to them yet. My phone accumulated voicemails and texts. My mother's messages evolved from angry, how could you just leave without saying goodbye, to concerned, we're worried about you, to guilt-tripping, you're breaking my heart with this silence. My father was more direct. This childish behavior needs to stop. Jason vacillated between mocking, did your feelings get hurt over a notebook, and grudging concern, seriously though, are you okay? I read them all but responded to none. Instead, I developed a new routine. Wake at 5. Write until 8. Work at the coffee shop until 3. Write until midnight. Repeat. The words came easier than ever before. I wasn't writing to impress anyone or to prove my worth. I was writing because I finally had something authentic to say. The dollar store notebook sat on my desk, now filled completely. I'd taped the useless pen to its cover, a reminder of the catalyst that had set me on this new path. What my parents had intended as a dismissal of my dreams had instead become its unlikely foundation. January arrived with Portland's typical dreary rain, washing away the Christmas snow and the last of my hesitation. I was no longer writing scattered scenes. I had a complete first draft of something that felt important, a novel about family, expectations, and finding one's own voice amid the noise of others' disappointment. For the first time in my life, I wasn't writing to earn my parents' approval. I was writing despite knowing I would never have it. And somehow that made all the difference. By mid-January, I'd refined my manuscript enough to show it to someone besides Rachel. Dr. Mitchell had been my creative writing professor during my final year at Portland State, a published novelist himself who didn't sugarcoat feedback but remained encouraging of genuine talent. I'd kept in touch with him after graduation, occasionally sending him short pieces for critique. This was different. This was an entire novel, raw and personal in a way my previous work had never been. "I have time on Thursday afternoon," he said when I called to ask if he'd look at it. "Bring it by my office." "But Dallas," he paused, "don't expect miracle feedback. First novels usually need substantial work." I printed the entire manuscript at the copy shop near my apartment, the stack of papers nearly 2 inches thick. The title page read "The Invisible Sun" in simple black text. No author name yet. I wasn't ready for that level of ownership. Dr. Mitchell's office looked the same as during my undergraduate days, book-lined walls, perpetually cluttered desk, the faint smell of pipe tobacco, though he'd quit smoking years ago. He gestured to the chair across from him while adjusting his reading glasses. "So you've written a novel," he said, accepting the manuscript with both hands, testing its weight. "What inspired this sudden productivity?" I told him the Christmas story, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. His expression darkened as I described the notebook, the pen, the overheard conversation. "Well," he said when I finished, "sometimes the best writing comes from our deepest wounds. Leave this with me. I'll call you when I've read enough to form an opinion." 3 days later, my phone rang during my shift at the coffee shop. Dr. Mitchell's name flashed on the screen. "I need to see you today," he said without preamble. "I've read the entire manuscript." My stomach dropped. "That bad?" "My office." 4 o'clock, he said, then hung up. The rest of my shift passed in anxious blur. I'd shown my writing to professors before, received criticism, made improvements. But this manuscript was different. It contained pieces of my soul I'd never shared before. Rejection of this work would feel like rejection of my very self. Dr. Mitchell was standing when I arrived, pacing behind his desk with my manuscript in hand, post-it notes protruding from various pages. "Sit down," he said, his voice unusually intense. I perched on the edge of the chair, preparing for devastation. "This," he tapped the manuscript, "is not perfect. The structure needs work. Some characters are underdeveloped. The middle section drags." He paused, fixing me with a penetrating stare. "But Dallas, this is the most honest, compelling thing you've ever written. There's something here, something real." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I felt lightheaded. "You think it has potential?" "More than potential," he said, sitting down. "With revisions, this could be publishable. The family dynamics, the quiet devastation of parental favoritism, you've captured something universal in your specific experience." For the next 2 hours, we discussed the manuscript in detail, what worked, what didn't, what needed expansion or contraction. Dr. Mitchell pulled no punches in his criticism, but underlying it all was a new respect I'd never heard from him before. "I have connections at several literary agencies," he said as our session wound down. "With your permission, I'd like to mention your manuscript to a former student of mine who's now an agent in Seattle." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "This will require work, Dallas," he warned. "Serious revision. Are you committed to that?" "Completely," I managed. Then take these notes. He handed me several pages of feedback and get to work. I'll be in touch if Sophia expresses interest. For the next 3 weeks, I lived inside my manuscript. Every moment not spent at the coffee shop was dedicated to revisions. I restructured chapters, deepened character motivations, clarified themes. The protagonist, a young writer named Elliot with dismissive parents and a golden child brother, became more complex, less self-pitying, more determined. The narrative expanded beyond simple family dysfunction into an exploration of how we define success and self-worth. Rachel read each revised chapter, offering insights that proved invaluable. "You're finding the universal in your specific pain," she observed one night as we discussed a particularly difficult scene. "That's what makes great literature." Meanwhile, my parents' attempts at contact had become more desperate. My mother left tearful voicemails asking what they'd done wrong. My father's messages grew increasingly stern, then surprisingly vulnerable. Even Jason's texts showed genuine concern beneath the sarcasm. After nearly a month of silence, I finally answered one of my mother's calls. "Dallas," her voice was tentative, as if she couldn't believe I'd picked up. "Are you okay? We've been so worried." "I'm fine," I said, my tone neutral. "Why did you leave like that? Why haven't you returned our calls? Your father and I have been beside ourselves with worry." I took a deep breath. I needed space to think about some things. "What things? Is this about Christmas? If you didn't like your gift." "It's not about the gift itself, Mom," I interrupted. "It's about what the gift represented. The notebook and pen that doesn't work, that's what you and Dad think of my writing. That's what you think of me." Silence on the line. "Then, that's not true. We just worry about your future. Writing isn't a reliable career." "You've never even read anything I've written," I said quietly. "Not once. You've dismissed my passion from day one while supporting every single thing Jason wanted to do." "That's not fair," she protested, her voice rising. "We've supported you too." "How?" "By making it clear you think my dream is worthless. By laughing about my useless hobby when you thought I couldn't hear." Another long silence. "We should discuss this as a family," she finally said. "Can you come over for dinner this weekend?" "I'm not ready for that," I replied. "I need more time." "Dallas, please." "I have to go, Mom. I'll call when I'm ready to talk." I ended the call feeling drained but oddly empowered. For the first time, I'd spoken my truth without apologizing for it. Later that evening, Jason called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded without greeting. "Mom's been crying all afternoon." "Hello to you too," I said, keeping my voice level. "Cut the crap, Dallas. You're acting like a spoiled child because you got a notebook for Christmas. Seriously. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," he challenged. So I did. I laid out the years of unequal treatment, the dismissal of my ambitions, the constant comparisons in which I always came up short. "That's not how it was," he protested, but with less conviction. "It is from where I'm standing," I replied. "But this isn't really about Christmas. This is about me finally recognizing that I don't need their approval anymore." The line went quiet for several seconds. "They're still your family," he finally said, his tone softened. "And they're hurting." "I know," I acknowledged. "And we'll talk eventually. But right now, I need to focus on my writing." "Your stories again." "Dallas." "Actually, I've written a novel," I interrupted. "And it's good, Jason. Really good." He scoffed, reverting to his dismissive self. "Sure it is." Before I could respond, a call waiting notification appeared on my screen. Unknown number with a Seattle area code. "I have to take this," I told Jason. "We'll talk later." I switched calls. "Hello. Is this Dallas Williams?" A woman's crisp, professional voice. "Yes, speaking." "This is Sophia Bennett from Cascade Literary Agency. Dr. Mitchell shared some information about your manuscript that intrigued me. I'd like to discuss it further if you're interested." My heart pounded so loudly I was certain she could hear it through the phone. "I'm definitely interested." "Excellent. I'll be in Portland next Tuesday. Can we meet?" As I scheduled the appointment, a strange sense of vindication washed over me. The notebook that was meant to discourage me had instead catalyzed the most important opportunity of my writing life. The Woodstock Cafe was quieter than usual that Tuesday morning. I'd chosen it for my meeting with Sophia Bennett because it was far from both my apartment and the coffee shop where I worked, neutral territory for what might be the most important conversation of my life. I arrived 30 minutes early, nursing an Americano while obsessively straightening the manuscript pages I'd brought. The revisions Dr. Mitchell had suggested were complete, but doubt crept in with each passing minute. What if he was wrong? What if the personal nature of the story blinded him to its flaws? Sophia arrived precisely at 10, easily identifiable by her purposeful stride and the leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s perhaps, with dark-rimmed glasses and a sleek bob cut. She spotted me immediately and approached with an extended hand. "Dallas Williams. Sophia Bennett." Her handshake was firm, professional. As she settled into the chair across from me, she ordered an espresso without opening the menu, then fixed me with an appraising gaze. "So Dr. Mitchell is quite impressed with your work," she began. "He's not easily impressed." "I'm honored he thought to share it with you," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Let's be clear," she said, accepting her espresso from the server with a nod. "First novels rarely succeed commercially. The publishing industry is brutal, particularly for literary fiction. I take on very few debut authors." My heart sank. This was the gentle letdown. "However," she continued, pulling out a notepad, "I stayed up until 3 in the morning reading your manuscript, which I almost never do. The Invisible Sun has something special, a raw authenticity that can't be manufactured." Hope flickered back to life. "You liked it." "Like is too simple a word," she said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "I connected with it. The family dynamics you've captured, the subtle cruelties, the devastating impact of parental favoritism, it's compelling work. With some additional revisions, I believe this could find a publishing home." The next 2 hours flew by as Sophia outlined her thoughts on the manuscript, where it shined, where it needed strengthening, how we might position it in the market. By the time she signaled for the check, my head was spinning with possibilities. "I'd like to represent this book, Dallas," she said finally. "And you as an author. If you're interested, I'll send over our standard agency agreement this afternoon." "I'm interested," I said immediately. "Absolutely." She smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed her professional facade. "Good. I should warn you, this is just the beginning of a long process. We'll need another round of revisions before submission to publishers. There will likely be rejections before we find the right home for this. Are you prepared for that journey?" I thought of the dollar store notebook sitting on my desk at home, its pages filled with the words that had started this journey. "I am." 3 days later, I signed with Cascade Literary Agency. Sophia wasted no time in sending a detailed editorial letter outlining the revisions she wanted before we submitted to publishers. The work was challenging, cutting beloved scenes, expanding minor characters, restructuring the narrative for maximum impact. Rachel became my sounding board, reading revised chapters and offering feedback over late-night takeout in my apartment. "You're getting better with every draft," she observed one evening as we shared pad thai from our favorite Thai place. "It's like you've finally found your authentic voice." "I never would have without Christmas," I admitted. As horrible as it was, it forced me to confront everything I'd been suppressing. She squeezed my hand. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes." Meanwhile, my relationship with my family remained in limbo. My mother's calls had decreased to once a week, brief, awkward conversations where neither of us addressed the elephant in the room. My father had stopped calling entirely, communicating through my mother instead. Jason sent occasional texts, mostly superficial updates about his life in Chicago where he'd started his internship. In late February, Sophia deemed the manuscript ready for submission. She created a list of target editors at various publishing houses, crafted a compelling pitch letter, and prepared to send out the first batch of submissions. "Now comes the waiting," she warned during our phone call. "Try to distract yourself with a new project." Publishing moves at a glacial pace. But distraction proved impossible. Every email notification, every phone call might be the one that changed everything. I threw myself into work at the coffee shop, picked up extra shifts, anything to keep my mind occupied. 3 weeks after submissions began, Sophia called while I was restocking the pastry case. "We have interest," she announced without preamble. "Princeton House wants to see the full manuscript." Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more publishers requested the complete novel. Then in early April, the call I'd been dreaming of since childhood. "Princeton House is making an offer," Sophia said, her voice controlled but excited. "It's not huge, they're positioning you as a literary discovery, not a commercial blockbuster, but it's a good deal for a debut." The advance was modest by industry standards, $25,000 paid in 3 installments, but to me, it might as well have been $1 million. A real publisher wanted my book. They were willing to pay actual money for words I had written. When the contract arrived the following week, I stared at it for nearly an hour before signing, tracing my fingers over the Princeton House logo, the formal legal language that represented the validation I'd sought for so long. That evening, I called Rachel with the news. "We need to celebrate," she insisted. "This is huge, Dallas." We splurged on dinner at a restaurant we couldn't really afford, toasting with wine neither of us usually drank. For one perfect evening, everything felt right with the world. Reality returned with my mother's weekly call the next day. "How are you, honey?" she asked, her voice carrying the now familiar mix of caution and concern. For a moment, I considered telling her about the book deal, sharing the triumph I'd achieved despite their lack of faith. But something held me back, fear, perhaps, that even this wouldn't be enough to change how they saw me. "I'm good," I said instead. "Work is steady. Your father and I were hoping you might come to dinner next weekend," she ventured. "It's been so long since we've seen you." 3 months had passed since Christmas. 3 months of limited contact, of focusing entirely on my manuscript, of building a life independent of their approval. The thought of returning to that house, of sitting at that table, made my stomach clench. "I'm not sure that's a good idea yet," I began. "Dallas, please," she interrupted, an edge of desperation in her voice. "Whatever happened at Christmas, whatever we did, can't we move past it? We're family." The word family hung in the air. What did that really mean? The people who were supposed to support you unconditionally, but never had. Or the ones like Rachel and Trevor, who believed in you without reservation. Still, they were my parents. And part of me, a smaller part than before but still there, wanted them to know what I'd accomplished. "Okay," I relented. "But just dinner. And I'll drive myself so I can leave when I need to." "Wonderful," her relief was palpable. "Saturday at 6. I'll make your favorite pot roast." After ending the call, I sat on my bed staring at the contract from Princeton House. Then I looked at the dollar store notebook, now framed on my wall as a reminder of where this journey began. I would bring both to dinner, tangible proof that their dismissal of my dreams had only fueled my determination to achieve them. The week passed in a blur of editing work with my new publisher and anxiety about the upcoming family dinner. By Saturday afternoon, my nerves were so frayed that Rachel offered to drive me. "I'll wait in the car if you want," she suggested. Moral support. I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. But thank you. As I gathered the publisher's contract and the framed notebook, I realized I was no longer seeking their approval. I was simply claiming my space as a person worthy of respect, regardless of whether they could give it. The drive to my parents' house felt like traveling backward in time. Same manicured neighborhoods, same imposing homes, same sense of not quite belonging. I parked on the street rather than in the driveway, a small act of independence that didn't go unnoticed by my mother when she opened the door. "You could have pulled in," she said, attempting a hug that I returned stiffly. "This is fine," I replied, following her inside. The house was immaculate as always. My father stood in the living room, drink in hand, looking uncomfortable but making an effort at warmth. "Good to see you, son," he said, offering a brief, awkward embrace. To my surprise, Jason was there too, lounging on the sofa as if he'd never left. He raised his glass in my direction but didn't stand. "The prodigal returns. Again." "Jason flew in for the weekend," my mother explained quickly. "Wasn't that sweet of him?" Of course he had. The golden child making a special trip home, probably at their expense. Some things never changed. Dinner was a masterclass in avoiding the elephant in the room. My mother chatted nervously about neighbors and relatives. My father discussed a challenging case at his firm. Jason boasted about his internship and the full-time offer that was all but guaranteed. No one mentioned Christmas. No one asked about my writing. It was as if the past 3 months of estrangement had simply never happened. Until dessert. "Dallas," my mother began hesitantly as she served apple pie, "we've been thinking. Your father and I know you're struggling financially with that coffee shop job. We'd like to help." My father nodded. "We could assist with your rent for a few months while you find something more substantial." "A friend of mine works in marketing," Jason added. "Entry-level position, but real career potential." I could put in a word. They were looking at me with such earnest concern, so certain they were offering exactly what I needed. So convinced that my current path was a dead end requiring their intervention. The manuscript pages and contract suddenly felt heavy in my bag beside me. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating since I agreed to dinner. "Actually," I said, setting down my fork, "I have some news to share." The sudden shift in my tone caused all three of them to pause. My mother's hand hovered over the dessert plates, my father's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips, and even Jason's perpetual smirk faltered. "What kind of news?" my mother asked, her voice carrying that note of concern she reserved for what she considered my poor life choices. I reached into my messenger bag and removed the contract, placing it on the table beside my plate. Then I retrieved the framed dollar store notebook, setting it next to the contract. "I signed a book deal last week," I said simply. "Princeton House is publishing my novel in spring of next year." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother stared at the contract as if it might be a clever forgery. My father's expression cycled rapidly between disbelief and confusion. Jason leaned forward, squinting at the Princeton House logo. "A book deal," my mother finally managed. "For your stories." "For my novel," I corrected. "It's called The Invisible Son, about a young writer whose family never believes in him because they're too busy favoring his brother." The color drained from my mother's face. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Is this some kind of joke?" Jason asked, reaching for the contract. I slid it toward him. "See for yourself. $25,000 advance. Hardcover release followed by paperback. Potential for international rights." He scanned the document, his expression darkening. "This is real." "Completely real," I confirmed. "My agent submitted it to publishers in February. We had multiple offers." "Your agent?" My father finally found his voice. "You have a literary agent. Sophia Bennett at Cascade Literary Agency in Seattle. One of the top agencies for literary fiction." My mother's eyes had filled with tears, though I couldn't tell if they were from happiness or something else. "Dallas, why didn't you tell us you were having this kind of success?" The question hung in the air, so dense with irony I almost laughed. Instead, I picked up the framed notebook. "This is why," I said, turning it so they could see it clearly. "This dollar store notebook with the price sticker still on it. This pen that doesn't even work. This was your Christmas gift to me while Jason got the latest iPhone because, and I quote, he earned it." My mother flinched. "It was just a small gift. If we had known." "That's exactly the point," I interrupted. "You never bothered to know. You never asked about my writing, never showed interest, never once considered it might be more than a hobby. You laughed about my useless stories when you thought I couldn't hear you." My father's face had hardened into the expression he used when preparing for a difficult cross-examination in court. "I think you're being overly sensitive about a simple Christmas gift." If it wasn't to your liking. This isn't about the gift itself, I cut in. It's about what the gift represented. It's about 23 years of being treated like my dreams don't matter, while Jason's every achievement is celebrated like a national holiday. That's not fair, my mother protested. We've always supported both of you. I looked her directly in the eyes. When was the last time you read anything I wrote? When did you ever come to a reading or a workshop? Did you even remember to call when I won the Willamette Valley Fiction Prize last year? Her silence was answer enough. Jason pushed back from the table. So this is all about you being jealous of me. Classic Dallas, always the victim. No, I said firmly. This is about me finally recognizing that I don't need your approval or theirs. This is about me succeeding despite the fact that my own family never believed I could. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Now wait just a minute. We supported you your entire life. Paid for your education. Kept a roof over your head. And this is the thanks we get. Some novel that probably paints us as monsters. Richard, my mother cautioned, placing a hand on his arm. But he was just getting started. You've always been too sensitive, Dallas. Always taking everything so personally. So what if we didn't throw parades for your little stories? The real world doesn't give out participation trophies. We were trying to prepare you for reality. The reality where I signed with a top literary agent and landed a book deal with a major publisher, I asked quietly. That reality. He faltered, mouth opening and closing without sound. Why didn't you ever tell us you were serious about writing? My mother asked, her voice small. We thought it was just a hobby, I finished for her. I know. You made that abundantly clear at Christmas. A heavy silence fell over the table. The apple pie sat untouched, forgotten in the wake of my revelation. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you, Dallas. I was worried about you. Writing is such a difficult field. The odds of success are so low. I just wanted you to have security. Like Jason, I nodded toward my brother. The safe investment. Jason, surprisingly, didn't immediately snap back with a retort. Instead, he was studying me with an expression I'd never seen before, something approaching respect, tinged with envy. I didn't know you were this good, he said finally. No one ever said. No one ever asked, I replied. My father, recovering his composure, leaned forward. This book of yours, is it really about us? About the family? It's fiction, I said carefully. Inspired by real experiences, but crafted into a narrative. The characters aren't direct representations. But people will think they are, he pressed. Our friends, colleagues. They'll read this and think we're terrible parents. Of course that would be his concern, appearances, reputation, what others might think. Not the pain that had inspired the book in the first place. The book stands on its own merits, I said. My editor believes in it because it explores universal themes of family dynamics and finding one's own path. Not because it's some kind of revenge tell-all. My mother had begun to cry quietly, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. I feel like I don't even know you anymore, Dallas. How did we grow so far apart? The question wasn't accusatory, but genuinely pained. For the first time, I saw real regret in her eyes, not for how the evening was unfolding, but for years of missed connections and misunderstandings. It happened gradually, I said, my voice softening. Each time my writing was dismissed as a hobby. Each time Jason's achievements were celebrated, while mine were ignored. Each time I tried to share my passion and was met with concern about practical careers instead. I picked up the framed notebook again, running my fingers along its cheap cover. But you know what's ironic? This notebook, this dismissive gift, became the catalyst for everything that followed. If you had given me something thoughtful, something that showed you took my writing seriously, I might still be writing the same safe, inauthentic stories I've been working on for years. I looked at each of them in turn. It was only when I realized I would never have your approval that I found the courage to write what was really in my heart. So in a strange way, I should thank you for this gift. My father looked stricken. My mother's tears flowed freely now. And Jason was staring at the table, a muscle working in his jaw. I never knew you felt this way, he said finally. about how mom and dad treated us differently. I just thought that you were the favorite because you deserved to be, I finished for him. And in their eyes, you did. You chose the path they valued. I chose one they didn't understand. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as she covered mine. I'm so sorry, Dallas. I never meant to make you feel less valued. I was just so afraid for you, afraid you'd struggle, afraid you'd be hurt by rejection. I wanted to protect you. By pushing me toward a sensible career I would have hated, I said, but without the edge that had been in my voice before. Yes, she admitted. It was wrong. I see that now. My father, never one for emotional displays, cleared his throat. This book deal, it's legitimate. Princeton House is a reputable publisher. One of the best for literary fiction, I confirmed. You can look them up. He nodded, slowly processing. And they're paying you in advance. $25,000. In installments, I explained. It's actually on the low end for advances, but good for a debut literary novel. A flicker of something like pride crossed his face, quickly masked. Well, that's impressive. Coming from my father, it was practically a standing ovation. Jason leaned back in his chair, studying me with new eyes. So my brother's going to be a published author. Who would have thought? Not you, I said, but with a half-smile that took the sting out of the words. Not any of you. We were wrong, my mother said simply. I was wrong. And I'm so sorry, Dallas. The words I'd waited years to hear. Yet they didn't bring the vindication I'd expected, just a quiet sadness for all the time wasted, all the support I might have had. I gestured to the notebook in its frame. This will hang on my wall wherever I live. Not as a reminder of resentment, but as proof that sometimes the things meant to discourage us become the very things that drive us forward. For the first time that evening, the tension in the room eased slightly. Not resolution, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Could we read it? My mother asked hesitantly. Your book. Before it's published. I considered the request. I'll send you the manuscript. But I want your honest response, not just as my parents, but as readers. She nodded eagerly. Of course. We want to understand. I'd like to read it too, Jason said, surprising me. See how badly you've trashed me in fictional form. A reluctant smile tugged at my lips. The brother character is actually more complex than you might expect. Unlike the real thing, he quipped, a hint of our old dynamic returning, but softer somehow. As we finished our neglected dessert, the conversation shifted to practical matters, the publishing process, timelines, what happened next. My parents asked questions they should have been asking years ago. Jason listened with unexpected interest. Nothing was resolved entirely, but something had shifted in the family dynamic. A door had opened that had long been closed. When I finally rose to leave, my mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm proud of you," in my ear. My father shook my hand with both of his, an unusual display of emotion for him. Even Jason clapped me on the shoulder with what seemed like genuine goodwill. I placed the framed notebook back in my bag, but left the contract on the table. For when you want to verify it's real, I said with a small smile. I know how you are, Dad. He had the grace to look abashed. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I'd won some imaginary competition with my brother or finally forced my parents to acknowledge my path, but because I'd finally spoken my truth after years of silence, and in doing so, taken one more step toward becoming the author I was meant to be. The following months passed in a whirlwind of activity as my book moved through the publishing process. Editorial letters arrived with suggested revisions. Cover designs were proposed and rejected until we found the perfect image, a notebook with a pen lying across it, simple but resonant. Marketing plans were discussed. A publication date was set. April 15th, exactly 1 year and 4 months after that fateful Christmas. Through it all, I continued working at the coffee shop, though I reduced my hours once the first installment of my advance arrived. The familiar routine of making lattes and chatting with regulars kept me grounded as the surreal experience of becoming a published author unfolded. My relationship with my family entered a new phase, not perfect but evolving. My mother called weekly, asking thoughtful questions about the publishing process. My father, true to form, had researched Princeton House thoroughly and occasionally sent articles about successful debut authors, his way of showing support. Jason and I exchanged sporadic texts, more cordial than close, but without the competitive edge that had defined our interactions for so long. They had all read the manuscript. My mother cried. My father claimed to have some dust in his eye during certain scenes. Jason admitted grudgingly that the brother character was not entirely a jerk and even had some redeeming qualities he recognized in himself. None of them disputed the fundamental truth at the heart of the novel, the damage done by years of unequal treatment and dismissed dreams. That acknowledgement alone felt like a victory. Rachel remained my rock through the entire process, celebrating each milestone and talking me down from moments of panic. When advance copies of The Invisible Sun arrived in a box from my publisher, she was there as I opened it, both of us staring in awe at the physical manifestation of my words. "It's really happening," I whispered, lifting one copy from the box, running my fingers over the embossed title. "It was always going to happen," she said firmly. The world just needed time to catch up to what I already knew. Trevor organized a pre-publication party at his apartment, inviting our circle of friends to toast the occasion. Someone had made a cake decorated with an edible image of my book cover. As I looked around at these people who had believed in me when my own family hadn't, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Speech," someone called out, raising a plastic cup of champagne. I cleared my throat awkwardly. I'm not sure what to say except, "Thank you for believing in me when it wasn't easy. For listening to me talk endlessly about this book. For being my real family when I needed one most." A week before the official publication date, my local bookstore, Powell's Books, agreed to host a reading and signing event. I sent invitations to everyone who had been part of my journey: friends, former professors, colleagues from the coffee shop, and, with some hesitation, my family. As the evening of the event arrived, I stood behind a curtain in the event space, peering out at the gathering crowd. Rachel and Trevor were in the front row, of course. Dr. Mitchell sat nearby, looking pleased. Various friends filled several rows. To my surprise, my boss from the coffee shop had closed early and brought the entire staff. I was scanning the back rows when Rachel approached. "Your family is here," she said quietly. "All three of them." My stomach tightened. Despite the tentative steps toward reconciliation, I hadn't been certain they would come. "Where?" She nodded toward the side of the room where my parents and Jason stood awkwardly, dressed more formally than the occasion required. My mother clutched a purse in front of her like a shield. My father kept checking his watch. Jason surveyed the room with his usual air of mild disdain, though it seemed somewhat forced. "Do you want me to say hello to them?" Rachel offered. I shook my head. "I'll talk to them after the reading. But thanks." The event coordinator approached, signaling it was time to begin. With one deep breath, I stepped out to the podium as the store manager introduced me to polite applause. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "This moment has been a lifetime in the making, though I didn't always know that." I spoke briefly about my writing journey, carefully avoiding any direct references to my family in the audience. Then I opened the hardcover copy of my novel, and began to read the opening chapter. The words I had written in that dollar store notebook, transformed through numerous revisions but still carrying the emotional truth of that Christmas night, filled the room. I read for 20 minutes, losing myself in the narrative, only occasionally glancing up to gauge the audience's reaction. When I finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. The question and answer session that followed was lively, with thoughtful queries about my writing process, influences, and themes in the book. Throughout it all, my parents and Jason remained silent observers, their expressions unreadable from where I stood. After the formal portion ended, I sat at a table signing copies for a line of attendees. Rachel managed the line, making sure each person had their book ready and helping me keep track of names for personalized signatures. Eventually, the crowd thinned until only my parents and Jason remained, standing awkwardly to the side with copies of the book they must have purchased before the event. As Rachel tactfully busied herself rearranging the remaining books, I gestured for my family to approach. "You came," I said simply. "Of course we did," my mother replied, clutching her copy tightly. "We wouldn't miss this." My father nodded stiffly. "Quite a turnout." The bookstore was pleased, I acknowledged. "Would you like me to sign your copies?" They stepped forward, placing their books on the table one by one. I opened my mother's first, considering what to write. Finally, I penned, "For Mom, thank you for teaching me perseverance, even when you didn't realize you were doing it. Love, Dallas." Her eyes filled with tears as she read the inscription. "It was beautiful, your reading. I'm so proud of you." For my father. To Dad, sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most worthwhile destinations. "Thank you for teaching me to be resilient. Love, Dallas." He cleared his throat several times after reading it, then simply squeezed my shoulder, words apparently beyond him. Jason's was the most difficult. After a moment's thought, I wrote, "For Jason, brothers are our first rivals and our most important teachers. Thank you for pushing me to find my own path. Dallas." He read it with an inscrutable expression. "Pretty generous considering." "The book isn't about revenge," I said quietly. "It's about understanding. Even the brother character comes to recognize his role in the family dynamic by the end." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "The reading was good. You've got a talent for this. I can admit that now." Coming from Jason, it was practically effusive praise. My mother stepped forward again. "We thought if you're not busy afterward, maybe we could take you to dinner. To celebrate properly." The offer hung in the air between us. Not so long ago, I would have declined, protecting myself from potential disappointment or dismissal. But the journey of writing The Invisible Son had changed me as much as it had changed my relationship with them. "I'd like that," I said. "Let me just help Rachel finish up here." As my family stepped back to wait, Rachel approached with a knowing smile. "Family dinner. Apparently. Progress," she observed. "Slow progress," I agreed. "The best kind," she squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you, Dallas. Not just for the book, but for finding a way to move forward with them without compromising yourself." The meal that followed wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses, moments of tension, old patterns threatening to resurface. But there was also something new, a baseline of respect that hadn't existed before. My father asked about future book plans. My mother wanted to know about the publishing process. Even Jason engaged, recounting how a colleague had recognized my name when he mentioned his brother's upcoming book. The dollar store notebook that had started it all now hung framed in my apartment, a daily reminder of how sometimes the things meant to diminish us become the very catalysts for our greatest achievements. The useless pen remained taped to its cover, a symbol of how expectations can be subverted, how rejection can fuel determination. In the months following publication, The Invisible Son received positive reviews in several literary publications. Sales were modest but respectable for a debut novel. 2 international publishers purchased translation rights. My editor began asking about a second book, which was already taking shape in my mind. I continued working part-time at the coffee shop, finding that the routine and human interaction balanced the solitary nature of writing. Rachel and I moved in together, finding a slightly larger apartment with space for a proper writing desk. The framed notebook took its place of honor on the wall above it. My relationship with my family continued its gradual evolution. There were still missteps and misunderstandings, but also genuine efforts to bridge the gaps between us. My mother started a book club specifically to read and discuss my novel. My father, in a surprising turn, asked for recommendations of other literary fiction he might enjoy. Jason, during a rare brotherly lunch, admitted he sometimes felt trapped by the expectations our parents had placed on him, an insight that helped me see our family dynamic from a new perspective. The dollar store notebook that was meant as a dismissal had become not just the foundation of my professional success, but the beginning of my personal healing as well. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. 6 months after publication, I received an invitation to speak at a writers' conference about breaking into publishing as a debut author. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of aspiring writers with dreams similar to the ones I'd harbored for so long, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me there. Success as a writer rarely follows a straight line, I told them. Sometimes the path includes detours through rejection, doubt, and even dismissal by those closest to us. But here's what I've learned. True writing comes from a place of authenticity, and sometimes we only find that place when we stop writing for the approval of others. I shared the story of the Christmas gift, the notebook, and how it had become both wound and bandage, both injury and healing. The lesson I learned wasn't about proving my family wrong, though that happened too. The real lesson was about finding the courage to write my truth regardless of whether anyone, family included, believed in it. Because ultimately, the only validation that matters is the connection between your words and your readers. After the conference, I returned home to find my apartment filled with flowers, Rachel's celebration of my first speaking engagement. Among the arrangements was a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "This came for you," she said. "From your parents." Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed in gold on the cover. A handwritten note read, "For your next bestseller, we believe in you. Love, Mom and Dad." Beside it lay a high-end fountain pen. It worked perfectly. As I placed the new journal next to my laptop, I glanced up at the framed dollar store notebook on the wall, my reminder of how far I'd come and the unexpected catalyst for everything that followed. In the journey from that Christmas night to this moment, I'd learned that sometimes the smallest, most thoughtless gifts can ultimately be the most transformative. That rejection can be the seed of authentic creation. That finding your voice often means stopping the desperate search for approval. That family relationships, like good stories, can evolve in unexpected ways if given the chance. Most importantly, I'd learned that the path to becoming the person you're meant to be rarely follows the route you expect, but if you stay true to your authentic self, it will lead you exactly where you need to go. Have you ever received a gift that seemed meaningless but ended up changing your life? Or found success in something your family or friends didn't support? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories of overcoming family challenges. Remember, sometimes the things meant to break us become the very tools that help us build our dreams. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.